The leadership race has wrapped up, and the federal Liberal Party has a new leader. And shortly, at least until the next election, Canada will have a new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. So joining us to chat about this and more is Leighton Gray. He's one of Canada's top attorneys and also the host of the Grey Matter podcast and television show. You can check out that program, and it's a good one, at returntoreason.com and also on X at Grey Matter Convos. So Leighton, good to have you with us again.
That's my privilege.
Hey, looking forward to chatting about Canadian politics here. Man, it's going to be a fascinating couple of months ahead of us here. What were your first thoughts when the winner was announced? No surprise, I'm guessing?
No, and I think honestly, I think it marks a sea change in Canadian politics. It's become very fashionable in our country to say that, the system is broken. Mr. Poilievre has said this a lot in the House of Commons. But actually, in my respectful opinion, being someone who studied this, Canada has a very beautiful political system. We have a great constitution, but there's a key part to it that has been really subverted by the Liberals. We call our members of parliament honorable. We call our prime minister the right honorable. And if you think of the American system is based upon a system of checks and balances. It's based upon a fundamental disrespect for government. And so what the Constitution in the U.S. promises to people is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the Canadian Constitution promises us peace, order, and good government. And peace, order, and good government is achieved through the honorable conduct of our members of parliament. And what the Liberals have done in the Trudeau era, in my respectful opinion, is they have hacked into that honor system. And so we have a prime minister who 6 times has been convicted of ethical violations. We have all kinds of scandals, really, that would have brought down any government at any time previously in Canadian history. And now we reach the point where, incredibly, we have a man who Canadians really don't know. We don't know anything about him. And he is selected by a group of elites, and he becomes our prime minister without an election, without any mandate, without ever having run for office ever in our country. And on top of that, with a very sketchy resume. I mean, he's vilified in Great Britain. He's held responsible for destruction by many people of their economy. Viva Fry tweeted out, he said 150,000 people just decided Canada's next prime minister. He calls him a 3-passport carrying World Economic Forum globalist, a climate crisis mania Davos whore. That's pretty strong. However, here's how Mark Carney describes himself recently on a podcast. He says, my weakness, people will charge me as being elitist or, a globalist, to use that term, which is, well, that's exactly, happens to be exactly what we need. So here we have an undemocratically selected prime minister without an election, and the honorable thing to do would have been by Justin Trudeau, getting back to my earlier point, would be, if he was going to resign, to not prorogue Parliament and continue to act as our prime minister for 2 months and get us into a trade war with the United States, but to call an election and give Canadians an opportunity to make a clear choice. It doesn't look like that is going to happen anytime soon. Mr. Carney describes himself as an elitist, as a globalist, and that's what he is. And he said in his campaign that he plans to declare an emergency in Canada and to govern Canada under some sort of emergency type government. And this reminds me of something, just to finish off the point before I throw it back to you, something called the Cloward-Piven strategy. This is a political strategy outlined in 1966 by American sociologists and political activists Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven. Now listen to this. The strategy forces political change to societal collapse through orchestrated crises. Sound familiar? The Cloward-Piven strategy seeks to hasten the fall of capitalism, which we're seeing in Canada, by overloading the government bureaucracy with a flood of impossible demands, like net zero, for example, amassing massive unpayable national debt, which we have in Canada, and other methods such as unfettered immigration, thus pushing society into crisis and economic collapse. So the whole purpose of the strategy is now to not give Canadians peace, order, and good government, but to govern us according to emergencies that are declared at the caprice of government and which give them enormous power, undemocratic power, to the point where if there is an emergency declared in this country, um, the Liberals could actually suspend free and fair and democratic elections, which is frankly has actually happened in Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky has suspended elections there because of the war that's going on there. Yes. So altogether, Canadians should be very, very alarmed about what happened yesterday, because now we have
Hmm.
someone who is a prime minister, and the prime minister has become the most powerful person in Canadian history,
Well,
and he's been anointed. He has not been democratically elected,
yeah,
and
that should
yeah.
be a concern. I think the way we've
Hmm.
handled this. I know it's an internal, you know, party election, I guess, in that sense, but he's going to be in charge here in a matter of days. Looks like uh, the prime minister, right? And yeah, that should raise some alarm bells for sure. Something else that should have raised, I think, some alarm bells. And I'm not hearing a lot of this in the mainstream media. That there was about 400,000 party memberships sold, and of course the whole thing was done online, so that adds a little more, I guess. Potential for manipulation. I'm not saying that happened, I don't know. But only about a third of those, 150,000, were able to be verified. So 250,000 memberships, they didn't get to vote? That's a crazy high number of disqualified memberships. I mean, so should there be some sort of an investigation into that? I mean, if that were to happen with the Conservative Party or any other party, you'd think there'd be some outrage.
Mhm. Well, this gets back to the question of honor. And the Liberal Party, unfortunately, has is completely disconnected from this concept. And the reason why this is important, getting back to my earlier point, is that the structure of Canadian federalism and peace, order, and good governance is based upon the honorable ethical conduct of our members of parliament. It used to be the reason why that title, honorable, exists is because under British parliamentary rules, under convention, if any member of parliament was involved in any type of scandal or if their integrity were questioned, they would be forced to temporarily step away until that was fully investigated, just as you described, and it was shown that there was no wrongdoing. That's why that title, honorable, is there. So Canada has a very beautiful, very effective political system, which has served us very well for a long time. But the Liberals have made an important change. They've hacked the system, and they're going to continue to abuse that for as long as they possibly can. And I predict, instead of calling a national election, which is what should happen, what they're going to do in order to install Mark Carney into Parliament is they're going to have a current member of Parliament, perhaps Justin Trudeau, resign and hold a by-election in a Liberal quote-unquote stronghold to install him there so that he can be a functional prime minister in the House of Commons. When the honorable thing to do, if the what should happen if we were being governed by, according to peace, order, and good government, is we would have a national election so that Canadians could make a clear decision on Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre and Mr. Singh and anybody else who's running for as a leader of our country.
Well, hopefully an election gets called soon. I mean, odds are that it probably will be, although he could wait. I mean, I do understand that the Liberal Party is quite a bit behind as far as fundraising goes. So who knows? They could pause it, right?
Hmm.
What qualifies, I guess, Carney to be the prime minister and to lead our nation for the next 4 years on the global stage, competing with the likes of Donald Trump? With all the trade wars and stuff going around, wars, literal wars. Canadians, what do we want? We want to bring affordability back, right? We want to see our massive debt reduced. So what qualifies Carney to be the guy to do that, you think?
Well, I think the question is rhetorical. I mean, it's unanswered. The
Yeah.
fact is, he isn't qualified, and if we define qualification in terms of that he has been selected, he has actually been elected. Even Justin Trudeau was a member of Parliament, and getting back to again to this question of honor, not to beat the horse. Back in 2015, when Justin Trudeau was running for prime minister, there are rules about disclosure, public disclosure, and that anyone who wants to be prime minister have to make. Mark Carney has refused to make those disclosures. the same ones that Justin Trudeau did in 2015. And so Canadians should be very, very concerned about this. We don't know who this is. We don't know what qualifies him to be our prime minister. We know that he has a very checkered history. Anybody who does not want a globalist World Economic Forum banker who cherishes net zero and supports basically socialist economic systems would not want Mark Carney as our prime minister. And there are many Canadians who don't want that kind of governance because we've had about 10 years of it force fed to us by the Trudeau regime. So I'm hopeful that we're going to get an election, but the fact that we have to hope for an election is part of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, you see the NDP kind of backing off of that a little bit now too, and of course, well, their polling numbers have just tanked, so that's maybe part of the reason for that. Um, yeah, I mean, what would you bet on? I guess as far as a federal election coming up, when do you think it's going to be called? What would you bet on?
Well, if you believe what Mr. Carney says, we're not going to get an election anytime soon. What I suspect is going to happen is he's going to be installed. They're going to have another MP step aside and give up their seat and have a by-election in a Liberal stronghold, and then he's going to become the leader in the House of Commons. And I think you're right. I think they're going to need some time he's going to want to implement some of his policies. This trade war thing appears to have been very successful, a very successful political strategy for the Liberals. And I think they're going to continue to pursue that to gain political support. They're sort of pinging off of, what Trump is doing. Which is not new, actually. I mean, this is something that Justin Trudeau did in the early days of his prime ministership when during Trump's first term in office, and I think they're going to continue to do that. So I don't think that we're going to get an election anytime soon. And Mr. Carney has told us that he's going to declare a national emergency and start flooding the economy with money. That he's going to actually start sending out checks to people the way that happened during COVID. And sadly, Mr. Poilievre seems to have that as part of his own plan. And that seems to be like right in line with this closed pivot strategy that I was talking
Yeah,
about earlier.
I mean, I just hate that idea. Again, so often we'll see, these kind of campaigns run on fear mongering, essentially,
Yeah.
appeals to our fear as a society, and we need Big Daddy, the government, to rescue us, to bail us out, to use our own tax money, to to bail us out, which of course has to be paid back by our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren on down the line. I mean, there's no end to it, right? So, boy. I just shake my head. We've got to wake up and say, hey, what are the real issues here? Of course, the tariff issues. Yeah, so what are the main issues going to be in this upcoming election? And every party tries to manipulate that, I guess, to their own advantage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so probably tariffs is going to be one of them. Affordability is going to be one of them, that sort of thing, right? So how do we get there from here?
hmm Well, if you look at Mr. Poilievre's 5-point strategy, frankly, on many points, it looks very similar to what Mr. Carney is saying. Time will tell. One of the things that caused the Liberals to be successful, I think, in the last two federal elections for certain, is that the CPC did not distinguish itself enough. There wasn't a clear choice for. We sort of got Liberal light from the CPC, particularly with Mr. O'Toole. What I'm interested in seeing from Mr. Poilievre is he going to distinguish the policies of his party very clearly from the Liberal Party of Canada and give Canadians a clear choice. Thus far, I don't see that. I see him following in the footsteps in terms of, a tariff war. He's all about that. He's talking about, subsidizing Canadian workers impacted by tariffs. He has not said that he's going to significantly cut back immigration. He has indicated publicly that he's going to continue the equalization system, which is a very sore point for people out west, especially in Alberta. He continues to support Mr. Zelensky in the Ukraine war, which is another Liberal Party platform. So it's hard at this point, frankly, for myself as a Canadian voter, to look at for the CPC, for example, and actually look through their policies and say, well, yeah, this is a conservative option. We don't seem to have a full blown conservative option in Canada the way they have in the United States. We have nothing resembling, for example, MAGA, which is against diversity, inclusion, equity, which has been made clear statements about gender, that's getting out of foreign wars, that's cut off foreign support, and on and on and on. We don't have that type of clear choice in Canada, and I think that's something that many Canadians are expressing lament about.
I think I would agree. I'd like to see some more of that. And Polyev has made some of that. I mean, he's again, talked about, two genders, those are the only ones that he's aware of, right? So very interesting. So a few more of those kinds of clear-cut differentiations, say this is us, this is them, I think might go a long ways here. So again, it'll be very interesting to see what the actual issues are. I mean, Polyev, I think, is probably a much better debater. So, we'll see how much traction they get out of that. But, again, some people like big government, the elitist globalist thing in Canada. So obviously they're betting heavily on that on the Liberal side. So hopefully this election will be a little more civil, but I'm guessing maybe not. This might be one of the most divisive, a lot of attack ads, that sort of thing coming down the pike. Is that what you're expecting?
Yes, unfortunately, that is going to be true. But again, what I'd like to see, I think Canadians need to be given a clear choice. I hope that Mr. Poilievre's election platform, his campaign, presents kind of clear choice on the issues that you were describing. He is obviously a gifted orator, one of the best that we've seen in recent years in the House of Commons, particularly in question period. He's had a lot of practice, but many people are saying that they want to see. First of all, I don't believe that the polls are as close as they are. I think that most Canadians are going to reject the Liberal government. I foresee that if we do have an election, that the CPC are going to win a majority. And the reason why I say that is because what cuts through differences in ideology is when you get down to people's pocketbooks. And that, because that affects everybody. That economics is the great leveler. And right now, the affordability of just life in Canada is so difficult. And where do you assign blame for that? It's got to go to the Trudeau government.
Yeah, I mean, people want change, right? So are they going to get change with Mark Carney? Is he significantly different than from Trudeau? From what I've seen so far, I don't think that's the case. And so I would tend to lean the way you're thinking here as well, but I guess time will tell. And I'm out of time. Thanks so much for being with us today, Leighton. Much appreciated.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thanks very much.
Leighton Gray is the host of the Gray Matter podcast and television show. You can watch that at returntoreason.com and on X at Gray Matter Convo.